Now we're going to talk about a few built-in methods, a few built-in jQuery methods, which you can and should use regularly if you're using jQuery. So to demonstrate, let me go ahead and bring my button back here. And I'm also going to include an image element below my button. Image source equals img / let's go with Wiley Beckert. And let me jump into CSS and just make sure our image is not too big. Okay, that's still pretty big. All right, so here we have a button and an image. Now, I'm going to show you two jQuery methods which allow you to hide and show an element. Okay, those methods are .show, unsurprisingly, and .hide. Okay, so let's demonstrate how they work. So for example, I'm going to write some pseudocode. When I click the button, I want the image to hide. Okay, I'm going to change the text of my button to hide image. Now we need to write this code. So let's break down the sentence yet again. When I click my button is the target. Click is the event that we're listening for. When I click the button, I want to run a function which hides the image. So, what's happening inside the function? We dig a little deeper and we're focusing only on the second half of the sentence now. I want the image to hide. So what is our target? It is our image. We want to execute the hide method. To test it out, when I click my button, the image disappears. Okay, now let's take a quick look in our inspector at exactly what is going on. I'm going to expand my body so that we can see the image and button elements here. Now when I click the button here, watch what happens to the image element. It gets this style attribute with a value of display none. Okay? So, .hide, the .hide method, assigns display none to an element. It doesn't use visibility hidden, it doesn't use opacity 0, it doesn't completely remove the element from your HTML either. It simply assigns display none to it. Okay, so that's how hide works. Now, let's go ahead and create a second button to show the image. So we'll have one button that says hide image and one button that says show image. Now the problem that we're going to see here is I need to execute a different function for each of these buttons. When one of these buttons is clicked, it's going to be a function that executes differently than the function assigned to the other button. So obviously this button selector is not going to be enough for us. So I'm going to give each of these buttons an ID. ID of hide and an ID of show. And I'm going to change this first selector to be hashtag hide. Or I could do button hashtag hide, the button with the ID of hide. Once again, you can use any CSS selector in these parentheses. Okay, and I'm going to copy this whole function, paste it right below. I'm going to change the hide ID to show, Let me go ahead and get rid of this button in case it's confusing anybody. Okay, this is nothing but a CSS selector. And I'm going to change the method which we're executing on the image from hide to show. So in this case, what's the pseudocode for this function here? When I click the button, when I click the show button, I want the image to reappear, to show. Whoops. Okay, so let's test this out. We have two buttons now and our image. If I click hide image, image disappears. If I click show image, the image reappears. Hide, show, hide, show. Once again, let's jump into our inspector and see what's happening. So hide image, we already established, adds display none into that element's style attribute. What does show image do? Show image simply removes display none. Okay, it simply removes display none. It doesn't add display block or display inline block or inline or flex or display initial or display revert. It doesn't add any kind of additional display property. It simply removes display none. Okay? Now, what if we wanted to have an element which starts from a hidden state and we want to then show it? Let's see if we can do that. My gut instinct there would be to jump into CSS and give this image display none here under the image selector in my CSS sheet. I reload my page, the image is hidden, and if I click show, does it appear? It does. Okay, and now let's see what's happening. So that's interesting. Here, when the image starts from hidden and I click show, it actually assigns to the element the display block style property. And now hide will revert back to display none. So it's interesting to note how hide and show will actually behave a little bit differently depending on the state from which the element is starting out in. Hide image will always, under all circumstances, assign display none to the element. Hide, that is, will always assign display none to an element. Show image will either change that style property of display none to display block, because that will override this CSS property in our style sheet. Or if there is no CSS property like display none in our style sheet, it simply removes the display none, which is added by the hide method. Okay, so in either case, these will work. However, it's just good to be aware of exactly how they're functioning and why they might not be working in a certain scenario. You may run into a certain situation where you're using the hide and show methods and you find that they're not working the way you expect. Usually, that's because there's some kind of inline style involved, this style attribute with some kind of property. Doesn't necessarily mean that you wrote inline styles, which we always tell you not to do, but it may be that those styles are being injected by some other function in your JavaScript. So if ever hide and show are not working the way you expect, open your inspector, take a look at the actual element you're trying to hide or show. Take a look at its style attribute. See if it already contains something that might be conflicting with hide and show doing their jobs. Okay, the last thing I want to show you for right now is we can actually combine these two methods into one function. jQuery allows us to do that. So rather than a separate button for hide and a separate button for show, let's go ahead and create one more button. and I'm going to call this button toggle image. Okay, and it's going to have an ID of toggle, or toggle img. Toggle image is going to be the ID. So in JavaScript, I'm going to write another function. When I click the toggle button, I want the image to hide or show. Okay? So that means if the image is already showing and I click the toggle button, I want it to hide. If the image is hidden and I click the toggle button, I want it to show. So what's my target? In the first clause, what's my target? It's the toggle button. So I'm going to select it by its ID. Hashtag toggle image. What's the action or event? Click. And what's the function I want to invoke? Well, I want it to run a function which causes the image to hide or show. So my target in this second clause is going to be, again, the image. And the method that we want to run here is not show, it's not hide, but it is called toggle. Just like that. No arguments, nothing. Let's test it out. Toggle image, shows, hides, and I'm clicking on the same button here to cause the image to turn on and off, essentially. Now let's dig a little deeper. Check our HTML. Currently the image is showing. It has style equals display block. If I click toggle image, it changes to style equals display none. So no particular surprises there. Let's see how it behaves if the image starts from a visible state. So the image is visible. I've reloaded my page. The element has no style attribute according to our inspector. And I'm going to click toggle image. Okay, so now it says style equals display none. And then it removes that display none. So it behaves exactly the same way as the .hide method and the .show method together. Okay, there are plenty of built-in methods for jQuery which you will find yourself using, and we will go over a couple more before this week is up.